to start this presentation today, before I dive in, I want to start with a poll. So if you would just humor me for a second and answer these questions. Let's see how we do. Should pop, guys, did that pop up on your screen okay? Doug or Brent?
I don't see it there, Jason.
You don't see it?
No.
Okay.
I got it.
Okay, I do. Sorry.
So the first question, does your organization have a risk manager? Somebody that's really tasked with that, with those things. Question two, do you do a risk assessment before approving vendors, events, those types of things? Does your organization do events or activities that you think are too risky? Ooh, that's an interesting question. This is anonymous. And do you require vendors to provide proof of insurance? So, a couple of interesting questions there, and looks like we've got about 75% of people have answered there. So, I'm going to run through these quickly, and then I'll end the poll. Does your organization have a risk manager? It's almost 50-50 on that one, so that's good. Do you do a risk assessment before approving events, vendors, et cetera, et cetera? Almost 50, it's 43-57. So in our non-scientific poll here, does your organization do events or activities that you think are too risky? And that's we've got three answers on that, and they're almost evenly divided between those three. Ones where they plead the fifth on that, they make me a little more nervous, but that's probably the honesty. Do you require vendors to provide proof of insurance? 100% yes. Awesome. All right. I'll share those results. Sorry, I should have done that to start with. Interesting answers there. Kind of what I would expect. I'm going to stop sharing those and we'll go back into here. Well, today's presentation, we've talked about this subject a number of times. Well, there are multiple subjects here, but really what we're talking about today are those outward public risk exposures that as local governments, many of us have. It's the town day celebration. It's the 4th of July. It's the rodeo. It's the, you name it. It's the park, the playground, those areas that we provide as a public service. We open up our property to the general public to come and enjoy. It's one of those things that make our local government agencies what they are. They're some of the most gratifying things that we may do. They may be some of the most frustrating things that we do if we're involved in the actual planning and execution of these events. And just from a risk perspective, they are one of the biggest risks that we face as an organization and as a pool with the trust. We have a lot of things going on. Right now, we're in the middle of this season, and some of you may say, "Well, hey, we did the 4th of July as our celebration. We're done for the year." And yeah, that's true. We still have some to go during the summer. We put this kind of in the mid-season because it doesn't matter if you finished your event last week or if it's in a couple of weeks when we hit the 24th of July or whatever your event is, or just Thursday at the park. These are things that we need to think about and we need to plan for. If you just finished your celebration, you probably have a lot of stuff on your mind right now. The things that went well, the things that didn't go well. What are the things that we can do better? Maybe there was a near miss, or maybe there wasn't. Maybe we had a problem. We had somebody slip and fall. We had a problem with a vendor. We had somebody get injured in the rodeo, et cetera, et cetera. There are all kinds of things that we may have dealt with. And that's why we want to have this discussion now and build on the things that we have. And so we're prepared, because I'm here to tell you, folks, we live in a different time now than it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. We don't have the luxury that we had to just, we can get by. We live in a small community and people are good people, and we're going to be okay. Those days, I worry, are really gone. There's still a lot of people out there that are, hey, we're going to help out our organization. But the problem is when somebody gets seriously injured, all bets are off. And for some people, if they can look for an opportunity to get some money or whatever, they're going to take that. And so um, we have to be intentional about what we're doing. That was the slide I was supposed to have up there. Is can we talk? Can we talk frankly and openly? And I appreciate those of you out there that said, there are some things that we do that I think are a little too risky. Some things that I think we should let somebody else do, or I'm really worried about being involved with this because I think something bad could happen. I think we need to have those frank, open discussions. And sometimes that sacred cow needs to become a hamburger. That thing that we've been doing forever may be something that needs to go away. And I know those are hard discussions and they're challenges that we have to face. But I really think as an ethical matter, as a legal matter to protect ourselves, we need to have these discussions. Okay. I know you have challenges. I know these things are not generally the first and foremost thing. That's not, maybe not where your training is. It's not the first thing on your job description is you're going to be an event manager. You're going to be involved with these things. I've lived in that world and worked with event people, and they're kind of strange people. As I worked with the Salt Lake Olympic organizing committee, I worked with event people who travel all over the world, and they go from one massive event to another, and they are really good at what they do. And they know building events that way. Probably most of us on this meeting, on this call today, most of us are not that type of an event planning person, and you don't have that level of depth to do those things. And you may feel a little bit nervous about that, and that's really what this presentation is about today. Events are awesome. They are a great thing to unify our community. You think about entertainment value and perception for the community. Just think back to what you did over the 4th of July. They're amazing things for our community. I think about our parks and our playgrounds. They're awesome. It's free entertainment, and it's a wholesome, healthy recreation, and all of those things that can bring us together. But when these things go bad, it can be just disastrous. We've seen fatalities. We've seen serious injuries happen. Sometimes to participants, patrons, sometimes to our volunteers that are participating and helping out with our events. Most of these were preventable, and it's our obligation to ensure that we're working to prevent those things, because otherwise it can sneak right up on us and cause us a lot of pain. And this is something that doesn't just go away. It takes a long time, and it can impact us, impact our careers, impact us just mentally. Hey, I was involved with an event where there was a serious incident or something like that happened. Okay, so the question is, and I know that's a little heavy that I'm throwing at you today, but that's really what we're facing. So how do we have fun and not hurt people or get sued and have all kinds of legal problems and things like that? Well, the answer is we need to be intentional about doing this. We need to build our programs from the ground up and say, all right, we are not going to have this kind of a problem. and to ensure that, here's what we're going to do. But if we just go into it thinking, we've never had a problem in the past, we may be on a pathway to disaster. So let's be intentional about this. Let's open our eyes. Let's ask ourselves questions like, what's the worst thing that could happen? And as you're answering that question and running through what those possibilities are, we want to look at what the probability is that that could happen. Put yourself in that situation. All right, we decided that we were going to have a local pilot fly over the soccer field and throw out candy. Well, what's the worst thing that can happen? And boy, I'll tell you, I can come up with a few. That's the world I live in. I'm a risk manager. But what's the worst thing that can happen? Well, the airplane crashes into the field full of children. Well, that's probably the worst thing in my estimation that could happen. Well, what's the probability that that could happen? And we have to go through those things. What are the things that we can do to mitigate that? And some of you out there are saying, well, you got to have some risk to have some fun. And I agree with that. There's a certain level of risk that makes activities funner. When you climb up on this slide, is there a risk of going down that slide? Answer is absolutely. Is it beyond what we're willing to accept? Well, I told this organization this slide needs to go because there were some unacceptable risks along with that. By the way, do you think I slid down after I took this picture? You're darn right I did, because these are the fun slides. Because there's a level of risk. All right, and we have to decide what our appetite for risk is. So we have to identify what those risks are. What could happen? And this is really a brainstorm session. We take our overall event or activity that we're looking at and we say, what could happen? How likely is it? We may put it into a matrix. This is the old standard risk matrix where we say how probable and how bad could it be. So what is the harm severity? If it's catastrophic and it's certain, well, we don't want to do that. And this is the point though where we look at that and say, what is my risk tolerance? What is my appetite for risk? And you may be more of a risk taker. If you find yourself in that red area, we need to talk because that would be unacceptable, and it places not only your organization, but it also places all of the local governments in the state who pool together in our risk pool. That puts many of us at risk if we're accepting risk that goes beyond what is reasonable. Okay, so we take a look at those things. Just on that, ask ourselves, can the risk be mitigated? Is there something that we can do to minimize that risk or the chance that it happens? Can someone else take that risk on? Now, there may be an activity that we think would be really cool, but the risk level is just too high for our organization. We don't want to put ourselves out there, and that can be for a number of reasons. It may be something that is specifically excluded from your insurance policy. Well, we're not going to take that on, but there may be a contractor out there who is willing to take that on and has an appropriate level of protection as well as mitigation to take that type of an event on. You think of examples of bungee jumping or skydiving. Our organizations are probably not going to take that on. I would put that in that higher level of harm severity, and our probability is higher that we might have an incident with that. But there may be something that we want to have like a bounce house at our event. Well, there may be a contractor out there who's not only good at doing it, but they also have adequate insurance and they can protect us. So let's talk about that. This is called risk transference. Contractually, we share that risk, or we put that risk on somebody else. We're going to have a bounce house at our event, but that contractor is the one that's taking on the risk with that, and we share that contractually. So in the contract, we have some indemnification language in there where the contractor indemnifies the city and says, whatever happens with this, it's on me and it's not on the city or the district or the county, whatever organization you're with. It lists, and in that we should list the your organization as an additional insured. Now that's legalese for you're covered under that vendor's policy. Okay, they should provide you a certificate of insurance listing you as an additional insured. What if they say, what the heck are you talking about? I've never heard of that. Well, that may not be the vendor for you, because I'm here to tell you, if you are contracting with, and I keep going back to bounce houses because that's a really easy one, but if you're contracting with a bounce house vendor, they've heard of a certificate of insurance before. They've heard of indemnification language, and if they haven't, that's probably not the vendor to hire. And so they will probably be very versed in doing that. So we want to make sure that we've got adequate limits. And I'm not going to go out on a limb and say here's how much coverage we want to have for each different event, because it's going to vary. If somebody is selling trinkets, it may be a lot less risk than somebody who's doing a bounce house or another activity that has higher risk, rodeo contractors, things like that. But just to give you a little bit of a guideline, we have governmental immunity. It's a statutory standard, and the last I checked, it was about $2.41 million is the limit. So when you start looking at how much insurance do we require, remember that that above that $2.41 million, you're really you're on that for the government, or you're not on that because we have that governmental immunity standard if we can make it stick. But below that, you own that risk. So what type of coverage do we want to require from that vendor? Well, adequate to cover the type of risk that we have into that, and adequate for the type of activity that they're doing. Well, sometimes people bring up, we have vendors come in and they want to sell pickle on a stick, or they want to sell funnel cakes, or they want to do some sort of food thing, or sell some other item, but they're locals and they don't have an insurance policy. When we asked them to do this, to provide us a certificate of insurance, they said, we don't have anything like that. Well, there are options for that. And like I said, most vendors that are going around and doing this, they will understand this. As we did our poll, most of you out there, I think that one was 100%, are asking for proof of insurance and certificate of insurance listing your organization as an additional insured. For those who are just doing this, or once or twice per year, they can buy coverage. Now they can always go to their local agent and probably buy a general liability policy that covers them for the type of activities that they're doing for a whole year. But let's say I'm only doing one event here, and I'm not advocating any one of these. This was a simple search for easy liability insurance that's out there. Everybody has to do their own research on what's appropriate coverage in that. But in what I saw in looking at this, I can go and buy a policy for one day that covers me to sell pickle on a stick. And it'll ask you about the specifics of what you're doing. And at the end, it's going to charge you $75 for that one day or something like that. It's fairly reasonable insurance. I realize there might be some out there that are like, well, I'm not going to make $75. Well, there's probably a dividing line between who should be a vendor at the show and who shouldn't. I know that's hard, but it's something that I think we have to realize we have to draw a line at some point, and it's important to protect our organizations. You say, well, they're just selling food. Well, the challenge comes if somebody is selling food and they make a whole bunch of people sick. Um, they may not have sufficient resources to cover all the medical bills and things that go along with that. We've got to have that layer of protection there for our organization. Otherwise, they'll come back to us and say, it was your event. You're the reason why I'm sick. So let's build that in. All right. We need to build a plan for our organization, for our facilities, all of those things. Put that together. We have to decide what to do. Does it need to be written down? I would say yes. I would go through that risk matrix and figure out what are our risks. Along with this, what's our highest level of risk and what are the mitigations that we put in place for that? Are we going to transfer that risk to somebody else? Good example would be playground equipment. Let's make sure as we plan our facilities, we get the right equipment. It needs to be IPMA meet the IPMA standard, which is an international standard for playground equipment. We need to put it in the right location. Sometimes we put something in the wrong location because it's easier that way, or that's the only option that we have. The playground, yeah, the playground's going to be right next to the freeway, but that's where we own land. Now there may be another thing that we can do there, fencing or something like that, to protect children from that risk, whatever it may be. The right installation. Well, we spent all of our money on this piece of playground equipment, and so we're going to get a bunch of volunteers from the community to come out and install the playground equipment. Now that's not 100% bad. You can use volunteer labor or your own team as long as you're overseen by a certified installer, somebody that verifies that it's put together right. I've seen some great installations by volunteer teams, and I've seen some terrible ones that actually made the piece of equipment unsafe because of the installation. Correct maintenance. This is something that we see on a very regular basis as we're out and about looking at facilities. The maintenance is the hard part. You can drive by in your truck and look at that playground and everything looks good, but unless you go out there and physically touch, move, climb on, go down that metal slippery slide, unless you do those things, you're not going to know exactly what's going on with that piece of equipment. So we've got to do those inspections, and we've got to maintain it. How do I close a playground? Well, putting a couple of 2x4s across the slippery slide is really not a good way to do that. That's just asking for an injury. All right, and the right documentation. I know you guys hate me talking about documentation, but if we can't prove that we've been reasonable and prudent, it's going to be darn hard to defend a claim against you. So we have to document all of those things that we're doing. When we maintain something, when I inspect something, I do that. If I find a problem, I document that. When I fix the problem, I document that. When there's an incident, I document those things, document it all the way around, because those are the things that are going to allow us to defend you if somebody says it's your fault because why I'm injured or my kid is injured. Let's switch back over to events quickly. If you're in a meeting and somebody says, you know what'd be awesome? Be very careful what you do right then. This is the point where that risk assessment and running it through a risk matrix, looking at what we can do to control the risks on that. This is a really important point. And if I'm not paying attention, that committee that you're sitting on might just say, okay, let's do it. And then we start having people out juggling chainsaws, walking through the crowds, and we've got ourselves to an unacceptable level of risk. Okay, so decide what our risk appetite is, and then stick to it and be ready to stick a fork in anything that goes beyond that level of risk. Who runs the event? This is one of those essential parts that can break down and cause some real challenges. We have to have a responsible party. I put on here the incident command system because incident command is great because you have one incident commander. The organization, you have one supervisor within that, and there's one ultimate responsible party that is over that. And you can have your risk manager feed in information there, but we want to have the responsible people along the way. Proper communication in our events, and then being prepared for the worst. What's the worst thing that could happen, and how do we prepare for that? What would we do if that happens? All right. So that accountability piece is essential. And I said risk manager, we can call that person the event safety officer, whatever you want to call that person. Have somebody that has a specific responsibility to be looking for risk. Even though it's everybody's responsibility, I want to have somebody that's tasked with going out and looking at those things. If you are concerned that you don't understand what those risks may be, or you may need some help, that's what Doug and Brent and myself are here for. Maybe you've got your town days events coming up, and you're like, I'm a little sketchy about X part of it. Give us a call, and we can either show up there, or you can send us a picture or a description, and let's talk through those things and help you with those risks. How do I fix things when an event's going on? What do I need to be able to do to fix that? What if something bad happens? How do I control that? Besides getting people aid and help, getting them to the doctor if that's what's necessary. How do I respond to a giant windstorm that comes through our event, and we have tents that get overturned, or we have tree branches coming down, or trees tipping over, or maybe it's a stage that has problems there. How do I go about dealing with those things? How do I control the crowd? What about my security? All of those things should be part of our event plan. Response plan, what could happen? And so we need to have a response to each one of those things. A simple one is lightning. During the summertime, we get significant thunderstorms. How do I handle lightning? Well, a lightning policy on that. And if that means that we need to go into a lightning hold and evacuate an area, so be it. Let's set that policy ahead of time when we're sitting in a conference room, and get everybody to sign off on it. So then, when the rodeo is just about to start and the lightning bolt hits in the vicinity, we don't have to even think about it. We just run with our policy. Okay. What's our risk response? If somebody gets injured, how do I respond to that? Do I have trained people that can go out and ensure people get the assistance that they need, but also respond to get information, and not say, oh, I'm sorry, it was all our fault, and don't worry, we've got insurance. We want to train our people so they handle those situations appropriately. It may be our fault, but it may not be, and that person may not know one way or another, and so we want to have them trained on the appropriate ways to handle those situations, to gather information, be empathetic, but not reduce our ability to defend a claim that's not our fault. Okay. All right. So a few questions to ask before we approve an event. We're sitting in that committee meeting room, and we start talking about that. Is it crazy? Is it something that's beyond what we should do? If you're drag racing down Main Street, that's probably beyond what we should do. If bungee jumping or skydiving is involved, that's probably beyond something that a local government agency should do. Other things that we should ask is it covered? Is it something that's specifically excluded from my insurance policy? And there are a few of those in almost every insurance policy everywhere. I would dare say everyone, but has specific exclusions. And rebound devices like bounce houses will be one that's specifically excluded from most policies. Why do we do that? Well, it's a high level of risk, and only certain members will want, excuse me, will want to do that. And we don't want it to have premiums reflect that risk on all of our members. And most of our members are really smart about, hey, let's get a vendor to do this for us, so then we don't take that risk on ourselves. Other things might be like aircraft could be specifically excluded. Rebound devices are bounce houses, trampolines, things like that. Mechanical amusement rides would also be something that you'd have to have a specific policy for those types of activities. Okay, all right. Other things, can you do it? Can you realistically do this type of activity? Can you legally do it? Fireworks have really been all over the news this year, and we have to ask ourselves, what about our fireworks show? How are we doing that? Well, if you bring a contractor in, it's the same thing that we've talked about. Ensure that they're indemnifying you and providing you a certificate of insurance for what they do at your activity, at your event. Some of our members out there will have the fire department or somebody in their organization do the fireworks show. Well, that the person that's responsible for that needs to be a certified shooter. Just because you're a firefighter doesn't mean that you are trained or equipped to be able to shoot fireworks. And so there's a state designation through the state fire marshal as a shooter. And they give us a little bit of leeway for fire departments that are doing this in situations like that. But let's not take the risk on ourselves to just say, let's have the fire department do it. Take the time to have them trained, have a plan around fireworks for fire control, all those things. You understand this stuff. I want to hit. I want to get done here briefly. I want to hit parades really quickly because this is one that really bugs me. Killing people at a happy event is a bad thing in my estimation, and unfortunately, we've had multiple fatalities in the state of Utah in parades. So let's just talk some rules, and you should put rules down on parades, and don't take any crap. Don't take any hassle from people. If they don't want to be a part of your parade, they can go to another one. These are our rules, and we're going to stick to them. So number one, no riders in trucks pulling trailers. Why is that? Well, if I've got somebody sitting in the bed of a pickup and there's a trailer behind, I don't know why, but people are tempted to step out of the bed of that truck or step off the trailer to go back and forth, and that's how we kill people. Make that a solid rule and don't deviate from it. No entering or exiting floats after the parade starts. If you're on a float, you stay on the float. If you're not on a float, you're not. You can't get on the float. Set the rules and have people watching those things. I know this is the raining on the parade. Candy's okay, but let's have walkers throw or hand out candy as they go along. Let's not tempt those little kids to run in under the trailer tires. Inspect floats, and this doesn't mean you're going to go through every little thing, but let's walk around and if you smell gasoline and you look underneath and it's pouring gasoline out, sorry guys, this float can't be in the parade until you've got it fixed so we don't burn it down. Make sure you have a good communication throughout that, both with your responders, but also with the people in the parade, and really don't take any guff on that. Let's keep those parades safe. That's, if I can have one impact working at the trust, that would be one that I would hope that I could do is help keep those kids alive and have a good time at the parade. Just want to talk just briefly about inspection and maintenance. This is one that we found at one of our parks here in the state. The picture's worth 1,000 words. We've got to get out and inspect our facilities. We've got to take a look at not only from the road, we've got to look at the hardware. We've got to identify those simple things that can cause big problems. So don't take shortcuts. Let's get out and take a look. Let's document those things. So front of house, back of house, all of those things. And these inspections don't happen from the truck. This is one that I found a long time ago, and this picture just creeps me out because a grate had been taken off of this irrigation structure, and kids had been down in there playing, and it was just a death trap, potential death trap for kids. Get out, and you wouldn't see this from the road. So let's get out and look at it. Let's document those things. You can have a checklist, that's great. You can document it other ways as well, but document all parts of this, from regular inspections to our repairs, preventative maintenance. Let's fix all of those things. This is another one that I found where this is on a swing, where the hardware had been backed out, and it was just a matter of time before it would fail. So don't leave it to fate. Get out and make it happen. Inspect it and make it happen. Just one other quick item. Cameras are our friend. They can save our bacon, or they can really fry our fannies if we're not doing it right. But we've had situations where, oh, did I lose it again? Something just happened. Sorry. Am I still on, Doug?
Well, we're hearing you. The screen's all gray though. There, it's back.
A little bit of technical difficulty. Cameras. We've had situations where we had an injury, had an incident happen, and they said, we did everything right, and your equipment was a problem and all of that. And we went back, and because the organization had cameras there and they had a good retention policy for the video from it, we were able to prove very differently from what was alleged against the organization. Some people don't like cameras. It's an invasion of privacy, all those kind of things. Well, that's not what we're taking video for. We're doing this to identify criminals that are vandalizing our equipment, or people who are trying to take advantage of us. So let's make sure if we've got an opportunity to throw these cameras in, they're a lot cheaper than they used to be. They're IP cameras, and so they go over the internet. It's much cheaper and much easier to do this, and you get some really good quality video from it. All right, just to wrap it up, and apologize I've gone long today. I'll blame it all on the technical difficulties. Plan for success. You've got to make your plan. You've got to work from a risk standpoint. We've got to identify those risks and determine are they acceptable? What's the probability that they happen? And what can I do to mitigate those things? Know your facilities, know where your problems are. Fix the problems that we have. Document when that happens, or every day on what we do. And really just think, you are the risk manager. Whatever your title is, you are the risk manager. Okay. That's it. Questions. Does anybody have questions? If you do, go ahead and type those into the chat box, and I'll look at those. I'm going to back out of there so I can maybe see the chat box.
We didn't see any questions come in yet, Jason. Been watching it.
Thank you very much. Guys, I got flustered there. What did I forget? Was there anything that we should add to this presentation?
I think you're right on with talking about just thinking outside of the box of what can go wrong. And that's a lot of it. Just being aware and realizing that, there are things that can happen. So think about it, like you say.
Especially, think of it in terms of, what's likely to happen and the severity of what might happen. And obviously, where those coincide, you really need to make sure you put emphasis on the attention you're putting there. If it's something that's fairly likely to happen and it could be a really severe event, then you definitely need to make sure that you're addressing that potential risk.
Awesome. Thank you. We do have a question. Benjamin asks, we've seen an increase in axe throwing companies. Any thoughts on that? And it used to be that picture with the axes flying around was kind of outlandish there. Yeah, we've seen a lot of those, and really it comes down to just what we've talked about. Well, let's distance ourselves from that risk. So if an axe throwing vendor comes into our community activity, well, what type of steps have we taken to distance ourselves from that risk? So certificate of insurance, indemnification agreement, and then what type of controls? Well, obviously we have to have a separation from the axe throwing area and general population, so they're not walking in front of somebody that's throwing axes. Okay, here's a question, or more of a statement maybe. Elected officials not knowing what the risks are and tell people different than the rules. Yeah. And I know this is a challenge. Sometimes our elected officials have a great idea. You know what would be awesome? And they come in and say, I want you to do this. Well, they're your boss, right? They're the ones that sign the paycheck. And so that puts you in a tough situation. And that's why I say that we need to sit around that conference room table and explain this, so it's not just right now, oh, hey, let's do this. We need to have that open discussion. We'll hear the risks that we see, and it may be as simple as, hey, this is something that our insurance says you can't do this kind of stuff. Or we would have to do something to mitigate that. And to tell you the truth, we're happy to get those calls, and sometimes we're very happy to be the bad guy on some of those things where we can make a tough decision a little bit easier. Now, don't give us every one of those, but sometimes I understand that happens. And if we can go in and say, we do not recommend that, if we carry a little bit of weight there, we're happy to help out on those. Sometimes though, I get calls, what do you think about this? And I'm like, well, as long as you've got good mitigation in place, I really don't see why you can't do that. We may have the perception that the risk managers of the trust, our favorite word is no, but that's not necessarily the case. We just want to make sure that we've got a good protection for us around those things. So I don't know. Doug was smiling. Do you have another answer to that?
No, it wasn't a different answer. It was just, the statement of, oh, it would be awesome. Those are like great, famous last words.
Yeah.
So.
Folks, thank you so much for your attendance today, and for listening to my rantings and ravings on this. I'm passionate about this subject because I don't want kids or anybody hurt at our events or on our playgrounds or anything like that. Let's make a commitment that doesn't happen at our organizations, and work to ensure that doesn't happen as well. We're here to help. That's our job, is to help you succeed and to help you determine the best approach to the risks that you face. So please give us a call, send us an email, and we're happy to help out. All right, folks, thanks. Appreciate all of your support out there and your work to make Utah a safer place. Go out and have a safe day.